Tell us, what is the latest on the attacks in both Israel and in Iran as well?
James, good morning to you. We have seen more Iranian missiles fired at Israel over the course of the last few hours or so, with warning sirens ringing out right across the country. However, it appears that the missiles which have been fired at Israel over the last day or so, there hasn't been as much of an intensity in those attacks as there were in the early days of these retaliatory strikes against the country following the IDF's strikes in Iran on military and nuclear targets there. We have, however, still seen some missiles getting through Israel's air defence systems, including a couple which seem to have hit an area north of Tel Aviv, where there were significant efforts by the Israeli authorities to keep media away from that site, particular sensitivities appearing there. There is a lot of concern among the Israeli public about these missiles, which are now targeting densely populated areas. However, the Israeli military is at pains to stress from its perspective that it believes it can handle this threat. However, there will be some difficult nights ahead for the population here. We know that both Israel and Iran are trading both military blows but also rhetorical blows, with the Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar touring a site today which was hit by an Iranian missile a couple of days ago. He says that at that site Iran was not targeting anything military and that it should therefore be stopped. And we've also had an ominous warning in the last few hours from the Commander-in-Chief of the Iranian army about what's to come.
You can see here the results of the Iranian war crimes. The Iranian regime is targeting civilians. They are targeting only civilians. You cannot find even one soldier which is dead after their attacks. Only civilians.
Seriously, a warning is issued to the residents of the occupied territories, especially Tel Aviv and Haifa, to leave these areas for their own safety and to not become victims of Netanyahu's barbaric action.
Now, it's worth pointing out that Iranian authorities have accused the Israeli military of also targeting civilian areas, not only residential buildings, but hospitals as well. Israel, for its part, says it is targeting military assets, and it has said that it has killed the wartime chief of staff of the Iranian military, a man who only stepped into that position in the last couple of days after other senior members of the Iranian military were killed in earlier strikes. We have also heard from the International Atomic Energy Agency confirming that the Natanz nuclear site in Iran has sustained some damage. That is an escalation of its reporting, of its concerns about that site compared to what we've seen in recent days. James?
All right, Matt. And Carrington, to you, the US president, of course, headed home early from that G7 summit. There's been a lot of debate in Trump world about whether or not the US should be involved in Middle East conflicts. What have we heard from the president so far?
Yeah, that's right. After that abruptly shortened trip to Canada, the US president has spent the day at the White House. He hasn't fronted the cameras, as you might expect for a man who is usually very available to the media. Instead, what we've seen is a series of posts to social media which do perhaps indicate that he is warming to the idea of the US becoming directly involved in this military campaign currently being waged by Israel. The first in that series of social media posts started with the expression, we now have complete and total control of the skies over Iran. A lot of people took that to mean that the US was starting to think of itself as working in concert with Israel. And then the next social media post was a direct threat, it appears, to the Supreme Leader of Iran, where Donald Trump says, we know exactly where the so-called Supreme Leader is hiding. We are not going to take him out. And he brackets kill, at least for now. Our patience is wearing thin. And then that final social media post, unconditional surrender. But as you say, James, there is this growing schism among key members of Donald Trump's supporting base about whether or not the US should be pulled in directly to this conflict. Many on those who consider themselves to be the kind of holders of the America First ideology, perhaps best personified by the former Fox News host Tucker Carlson, say that the US should not be led into this. There is no national interest in the United States being drawn in, but there are those defenders of the relationship with Israel who say that this is now a once-in-a-generational chance to take out Iran's nuclear capacity, given how badly their defenses have already been depleted by these Israeli attacks. But it should be pointed out, if the United States does now get directly involved, it will be much harder for them to argue that Iran has no right to attack US assets that are in the region. Up until this point, Iran, of course, has focused their firepower directly at Israel. They haven't attacked US bases, and there are many that are vulnerable potentially to Iran attack. If the US was to use its own military to strike Iran, that you think would be a major incentive for Iran to strike back. The real question is whether or not they're going to use their so-called bunker buster bomb, also known as the massive ordnance penetrator, and whether or not that would be used on the Fordo nuclear facility. This is a nuclear facility that is deep underground, and the US is seen as the only country with the capacity to actually fully disable it. At this point, the US has not said that it will use its own military, but that question remains live, and we wait to see exactly what the US president determines.